Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where I talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and/or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Legacies. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. First and foremost, I love that literally the premise of this episode is like, oh, right, so the school has to pay the property tax, which I'm wondering, why did that pop up now? Like, I guess it's just a situation of when it rains, it pours, because initially they're going to have like a fundraising month. They're going to do some car washing, this and that. It's like, no, but also, we should also sell some art that me and Hope make. You know, Cleo made that suggestion, which Hope was like, no, I didn't sign up for it. And Lizzie was like, too late. But then it's like they owe like $91,000 in property tax. And Lizzie's like, nope, we're going to get on making this a fundraiser day immediately. Right now, let's get started. I love the whole thing of Caleb getting all dressed up too, telling Rick, like, why are you... telling Laura, like, what's with the tie? Oh, don't even get me started on the shoes. Like, I get why I'm dressed up. And he's like, why are you dressed up, Caleb? And he's like, I'm going to the bank, you know, wanted to take on more responsibilities and stuff like that. And he's like, watch this. And he puts his hand on Rick and is like, 0% interest, for like 1,000 years or something like that. It's like, which is like, Alaric is like, no, this is a human issue. We're going to solve it a human way. No supernatural stuff, which is so interesting because like, when you think about that, you're like, yeah, honestly, that is kind of incredible to think about. Like, yeah, because that's what I'm wondering, like, were there supernatural reasons why that never came up before now? I mean, to be fair, like, the school's tuition is very low because no one's really going, but it's just like, it just seemed like that kind of came out of nowhere. It's just like, oh, like, that's why I'm wondering, was there like a supernatural thing in place that was keeping that in check, and it's just like, oh, it fell through or something? That's why I'm like, what's going on there? Like, why is that now an issue? It's never been an issue in the past 2 seasons until now. But like I said, I guess it's just simply, when it rains, it pours. It's just also, it's like, yeah, despite all the supernatural stuff that goes down, this being a school for the supernatural, they're about to be undone by a very human thing, and that's property tax. I thought that was just incredible. But just focusing on the Lark wanting to handle this things his way. I love that he goes to the bank and it's like, oh, it meets the lady there and it's like, oh, her name's Vera. And it's like, oh, your last name, why does it sound so familiar? It's like, oh, you're Dana's mom. Huh, interesting, right? Your daughter that's like, yeah, mountain lions. It's like, right, the tragic, situation of your daughter getting killed by a mountain lion. It's like, yikes. And, but then it's like, he's like, she starts flirting with him. He's like, whoa, don't you and your husband work at the pharmacy? She's like, oh yeah, basically you're recently split. And obviously, like, her propositioning him because it's like, well, you're kind of denied. And I love her basically being like, your desperation and sincerity is basically, for her, it was like, it's killing the mood of like, I kind of wanted something a little bit more, but it's like, you're kind of killing the mood a little bit with your desperation and sincerity. But I might be willing to give you a loan if you... And it's like, and he's like, are you propositioning me? He's like, I told the kids to handle things the right way. And he's like, this is not the right way. It's so weird that she's like super into him like that. I do love that later on he's like, though he's still happy about it because he's like, I still got it. But it's like, that's so weird that was happening. So that was an interesting circumstance on its own. That's that situation alone. Obviously, the whole... Caleb was kind of left in charge to make sure, like no one else tries to have some supernatural response, to try and help with this, current situation. So it's like, wait, you want me to stop people from doing what I wanted to do? It's like, exactly. So he's kind of in charge of things. And obviously the day isn't going the way they want to because no one's showing up. I love that, like, you have Jed working on a car, and then like Caleb keeps throwing it in his face. Yes, what kind of person sleeps with another guy's girlfriend? It's just kind of like, yeah. So get back to work on that car. It's like, oh, poor Jed. I mean, it was a low and scummy move, but still, it's like, oh, that's gonna get lloyded over his head forever. They're never gonna let, especially Caleb, because like, yo, MG's his boy. So it's like, yeah, that's my brother. That's my boy. You doing that too? So it's like, yeah. There's even this, interesting enough about Jed, I love that moment with him and Wade, where he was like, hey, did you hear that? And Wade's like, dude, I'm tired of, like, having to constantly explain this to vampires and werewolves. I don't have superhuman hearing. I'm just a fairy. Like, so for him, it's like probably a school of just like, oh, I guess for him, it's just like, just because I'm a supernatural, like, I mean, I guess because witches don't have naturally supernatural hearing. Like, I love that Jed kind of looks at him, he's like, and Wade's like, I'm sorry, like, it's just, that was kind of pent up aggression for, like, the fact is that, I guess it happens all the time. Like, oh, do you hear it? It's like, no, I don't hear it. I don't have superhuman hearing, guys. I'm just a fairy. Like, my powers don't come from that, I just love that. But, also that we end up getting a leprechaun, which looking a lot more like not your traditional Leprechaun, but more like the horror Leprechaun, from the Leprechaun movies with Warwick Davis. So I thought that was interesting. I'm surprised they kind of went with a more, like I said, that aesthetic. And I guess it's just because of American Gods. I was like, oh, I probably would have thought like they would have gone maybe something along those routes, kind of being like, oh, kind of going against the typical depiction of a leprechaun or something like that. But regardless, it's not like, it's just interesting. Like I said, I guess I wasn't kind of expecting that. Once again, also expecting it to look so much like, I mean, that's probably what they're pulling inspiration from, is the horror movie to a certain extent. But, or horror. I always, regardless. But obviously it's like, they don't really necessarily lead you to a pot of gold. But what's interesting in this universe is they eat wealth. They get attracted to wealth, but they also bring wealth nearby. And they attract, what calls humans to kind of spend their money relentlessly. And then there's the whole thing of Lizzie being like, blah, 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 history, blah. It's like, it's always the finer print, because like for her, she's looking for a loophole around this, which Caleb is like, no, how do loopholes usually work out for us? But for Lizzie, it's like, oh, this is a win-win. They bring in money for the school and everything. And she also comes at it from a perspective of kind of wanting to handle things like, oh, we can finally get like the smoothie bar here. Obviously it's like, it's more so what she wants, but she wants to make it seem like it's for the school. But when all the people come and I love the montage of just like cleaning the cars and just like, making it rain with the bills and everything. I'm like, this is unnecessary, weird, and crazy. Which is interesting at the same time. Like, obviously, Cleo and Hope have actually kind of hit it off and become really good friends. But Cleo's trying to help Hope deal with the whole Landon thing, because obviously letting go is not the easiest thing. So it's like, it's kind of like you kind of have to, do something drastic in that regard, which isn't always the best thing, because I think Hope has actually made some very drastic moves in the past, and, it doesn't always work out necessarily the way you were kind of hoping and think they would. But I thought it was interesting that when it was all said and done, they used Landon's remains and sculpted a statue of him out of it, a bust of him out of it. And I thought that was interesting. And I love the writing, what she had put on him. It was the word she needed to escape her prison. Because, not the prison, but the simulation box, just because, that whole thing was about her letting go of Landon, and that was the word to kind of escape, and she's like, I was like, I love that coming full circle like that. I was like, oh, that was beautiful. I mean, sadly, we know Landon's still alive and everything. So for her, she, it was almost kind of a thing of like, by doing this, I can just kind of finally let Landon go. But when someone came to like, oh, I want to buy this bust, I have to buy it, Hope couldn't let it go. And that ends up becoming a thing for her. It's like, I still believe Landon's out there, especially when she finds out a leprechaun's responsible for all of this. Because at first, it's just kind of like, okay, they were just getting enough money for the school. But, once again, Lizzie started going like, no, we could get more. Like, I'll think about all the stuff we could do at the school. But then, it's like, because from the beginning, Caleb was like, Hope's not going to appreciate you lying about there being a monster. I didn't even think about this because I'm such an idiot. But I love that Hope started explaining, like, what this means, right? And Lizzie kind of was like, no, what is it? It's like, if a monster's here, that means it came from Malivore, meaning there's some pit to Malivore still open. And Lizzie just thought, oh, I was like, right, I didn't even think about that. I was like, right, because the pit that they're aware of closed up the moment Hope and Landon came through it, like 2 episodes back. So I think that was actually 3 episodes back. But regardless, I just thought that was interesting. I was like, right, I completely did. I let that detail kind of slip my mind. But that actually led to an interesting thing between Cleo and Hope. That, like, obviously, well, for one, Cleo's getting filled in the entire time about, oh, what's a Malivore monster, this and that, and it's like, oh, all this crazy stuff of like, right, yeah, because it's kind of interesting, because all at once your worldview on things is like, yeah, you're a witch at a school with vampires and werewolves. I don't know if it, I mean, you would think it would come up considering Wade being a fairy. Like, it's like, right, there's like other supernatural things out there. But it's also like, all right, yeah, there's a whole other side that this school has had to deal with, which is like, yeah, probably should have brought that up. I also love the whole thing of like, Hope was so angry she had the axe, and you had Caleb be like, whoa, Hope, I know we've all thought about it, but don't kill Lizzie. But him trying to be the voice of reason with the whole situation, because I love, like, you had Lizzie being like, oh, like, because of your, like she was snapping at Hope about like, oh, like her emotional situation or something like that, and even Hope being like, wait, me and my emotional situation, almost like the pot calling the kettle black, like, that's, but Hope ends up letting the Leprechaun go free just so she can trail it back to, the pit, but, also having to fill her in along the way. It's like, right, this might lead me to Landon. Like, right, I should also probably bring up the fact is Landon was a Phoenix. Also, Malivore might be his dad. It's like, I know this is a lot to kind of take in, but if you don't want to help me, you don't have to. And it's like, no, I'm down to help. What are friends for? So, sadly, things didn't work out the way they were hoping. At the end, like, Cleo ended up she accidentally kills the Leprechaun. She's like, I didn't expect him to explode, because for Hope, it was like, this is my way because this is a way to get to Malivore. Because also they had to explain the prison world too. I was a little suspicious in certain regards, just because I'm like, I guess it makes sense. You're just going to have to explain it because it's something that's so everyday to you guys is something new to her. But I'm like, the fact that they're explaining makes me wonder, are they setting that up for something that, especially what they're doing with Cleo, I'm wondering, are we going to find out that there's more to it than that? I don't know. I think there's going to be a reveal about who she really is. Like, I think so. I don't know if Hope's actually brought up her last name in front, because, like, the moment we find out, really quickly, when we find out about Cleo's circumstances, it's like, oh, like, what was it, like, her family, or I think she even said, like, it was specifically, like, her sisters were killed, and she's the only one that survived, and obviously that's a tragedy she kind of had to find a way to move past, so she's trying to do the same thing for Hope, but obviously for Hope, it's like, no, she's so desperate to hold on to Landon that, because it's like, yeah, you were so obsessed with Landon, like, that's all we were talking about. At no point in time have you actually tried to get to know me. Because for Hope, it's just, she kind of keeps people at a distance. That's always been her thing. But especially because of this Landon thing. Because it's always been the thing. It's like, we finally get together and then just have that taken from her. It's like, because so much has already been taken from her. Her mom, her dad, and it's like, all she has is this place. For her, it's like this place that, the Salvatore School is her home. And Landon, those are the only things, and it's almost like without, like, it is that thing of like, don't make something. I think that's a lesson that Hope still kind of struggles with, is like making something your everything, and Landon became her everything, and it's like, but it's also that thing of like never giving up on the people you care about. Like, so for her, if there's any way, like, I cannot stop until I've exhausted every possibility. But Cleo's like, well, you won't stop until it's the end of you, and kind of it's upset, because it's like, I'm trying to be there for you, but you're not willing to listen. But the reason why I'm bringing up, like, I don't know if she knows Hope's last name, because it's like, oh, Michelson, because I'm like, let's not forget, her family's done some killing. Not just her dad, a lot of people. Her uncles did a lot of, and aunt, because you can't cut Rebecca out of it. They did a lot of killing in their days, and I'm wondering, I'm like, are we going to find out that Cleo is connected to that? Like, we're going to find out, like, Klaus or maybe someone else in the Michelson family is responsible for what happened there. Like, I think it's going to be a revelation on that front. Because there was also, like, the thing she was reluctant, because, like, for her, she had said, like, that's the reason why she's adamant of not really going down a route of violence, because that's why she was not too cool about, like, torturing or killing anything of the supernatural or anything or anyone. That's why she was reluctant to go down that route with the Leprechaun, because she thought, like, at first thought that Hope was torturing it. But it's like, I'm waiting for it, because it's like, they're setting that up, like, because we're spending a lot of time with Cleo, then I'm like, it must be like a big reveal about who her background or her circumstances. So we'll ultimately have to wait where things kind of go on that front. Another thing is the whole MG situation. Like, apparently, like, this illusion spell thing that's going on, and obviously he didn't show up for the meeting, so Lizzie's super pissed at him. But he's like, come on, like, it's like, I'm getting dressed and stuff like that, and she's looking, and he's like blocking. I'm like, what's so important about, like, the illusion spell? Like, why is it such an issue that he's trying to get in touch with Alyssa? And she's like, do you remember the last time you said no and what you missed out on? It's like, he's like, yeah. She's like, well, this is a lot less exciting than sex, but next time don't miss the meeting. But we're working on fundraising. You're the cook, and he's making cookies and stuff like that. But there's such a high demand that obviously he has super vamp speed, but the oven cooks at regular speed. So Josie's willing to help him out, because Josie's kind of avoiding something in her own right, and she ends up taking truth weed. And it turns out, like, oh, she has a thing for Finch, and it's like she's scared. And she's like, what if the study date was more? And, because for her, it's like every time it comes to her relationships, things don't work out. Whether it's the Penelope situation, the Landon situation, it's either, something happens to him, they leave. Like, it's just her love life hasn't worked out the way she wants it to. So she's kind of scared to kind of jump into something because there was a whole situation with, what's her phrase, that ended up, they ended up kissing and she ended up leaving. So it's like, oh, but prior to that, her last relationship was with Landon and that didn't work out. So, it played out the way it did. So it's one of those things where you're just going to be like, you're reluctant to kind of put yourself out there. So, but I liked what MG said to her. Like, you can't let fear stop you from being honest with the people you care about. And he'd been like, damn, almost been like, oh, that's pretty good advice. And I need to kind of, take that advice on my own. But, we do see Josie, Ethan takes Josie to go to the grill because that's where Finch works at. And obviously Finch is just kind of like, all right, you just kind of bailed on me. She's like, obviously it's like, I'm trying to figure things out. I come with a lot of baggage. And it's like, yeah, it was just a study date, right? But it's like, no, it was more than that, right? And she's like, why don't we just go on a real date? Because once again, she was just scared. And so, because even Ethan being like, yeah, you have to be careful around, like I told Maya, be careful around Fitch. There's something, even I'm like, ever since she popped up, I'm like, there's going to be something about her. I don't know whether she's something supernatural or not, or just, there's got to be something about Finch. It's like, I don't know. I mean, it doesn't always have that, but you just, from the very beginning, I've gotten that gut feeling like there's just something about her. Not necessarily that she's going to be a bad guy, or maybe she will be and then turns into a gut, but it's like, there's just something about her, something about her and Chloe just don't sit right with me that I don't know. I can easily be reading too much into it, but I'm just a little wary because you just have to be, careful around, I mean, it wouldn't be the first time, like, someone ended up, being not who you thought they were. So we'll see on that front. But we ultimately end up kind of finding out, like, MG's side of things. Well, going back to it, it does seem like, Finch is kind of like, oh, like, I work double shifts or, like, on, like, the weekends or whatever. But, as I take you home, we'll kind of, work out, like, if this whole, like, going on a date thing. So it's like, okay, things are working on that front, but like I said, I'm still just kind of, I'm weary. We'll see. Things have worked out, though. Yeah, the Leprechaun is dead, but it's like, hey, we have enough to pay back everyone who, was under the Leprechaun spell and kind of, like, spend a lot of money here, and also have enough to save the school and everything. So things kind of worked out on that front. But other than that, we find out about MG's circumstances because he ends up telling Lizzie, he's like, hey, there's something I got to tell you about, like, promise me you won't kind of think less of me. She's like, you've kind of seen me at my worst, so, like, how can I'd be a hypocrite if I wasn't kind of there for you, because she had ended up kind of, because Caleb had actually talked to her about, like, because obviously she's like, she was under the impression, like, oh, you want to burn this place down. And it's like, because for her, it's like, I'm the one that seems like who wants to just kind of because this place isn't what it used to be. Because for one, Josie not being there all the time and just, like, a lot of the students, like, what she's come to know as our home being a certain way for so long is different now. But Caleb kind of points out, like, he doesn't want the place to literally burn down. He wants them to kind of kind of build it back up to be something better than what it was before. And so Lizzie, kind of taking away from this, it's like, I got to stop living in the past. Got to, move forward. Like, not about how things were before, but what they could be going forward. So I thought that was kind of interesting. But obviously, like, the moment Hope had found it, I had to rewind it, like, when she was moving the money and stuff, and we saw some of that stuff. I was like, wait, isn't that the Ascendant? I'm like, wait, and then it kind of pieces together. Also, really quickly, I do apologize, I'm all over the place. I wish I'd done this a little more consecutively, like with some of my plot points. I thought it was interesting that, like, she's like, all right, he was, like, trying to get in contact with Alyssa, and she's like, you know what, okay, fine, I'm gonna get back with you. Which the moment he's like, oh, sweet, but he's like, wait, no, that's not what I want. And she was like, well, I didn't want to actually get back with you. I was like, I love that she can snap back like that. It's like, okay, it's so crazy, because I guess, well, because I know the actress who's playing Alyssa Chang is in a new CW show, so she's not going to be in the show that often. She might pop up every once in a while going forward, but that might be it. Or at least at these points in the episode, production-wise, she was probably working on, like, that other show. I think the show's called Kung Fu. Like, I think she was working on that at the time, so that's why she's making smaller appearances and stuff like that. But I just thought that was interesting. I guess she's just going to a completely different school. It's like, oh, the way that was kind of built up, you thought it was going to be more. It's like, I don't know, maybe just because of like scheduling conflicts, I don't know if this was the original plan for that relationship to be just kind of like, oh, start there and just ultimately end up this way just because it's Alyssa and it's MG, you know, and maybe that's just furthering the whole Lizzie plot line. I don't know. I don't know if this is what they always originally had planned, or did they just kind of have to work around the fact it's like, well, we kind of have to work around the fact is that the actress's schedule just, you know, I don't know. I'm just curious about that. But nevertheless, that was just something kind of floating through my mind. I figured I should like talk about, because I was like, right, I figured that's why she's not going to be in the season at all, or and if she is, it's going to be in probably smaller doses just because of that. Maybe not. But he was bringing up about like, because he's like, oh yeah, the thing inside the box being missing. She's like, I had nothing to do with that, and it's like, right, because at the time Lizzie came busting in saying that the leprechaun had eaten all the stuff, and anything wealth related it eats, so it ate whatever it was. And then we kind of find out what it was. It's the Ascendant, because even Hope like pops it, because like Lizzie was like, I wish you had told me, because I would have done whatever it is to help you. And he's like, and he kind of realizes like, and he turns around and finds Hope there. It's like, she's like, how could you? And that's the thing, like, so he had the Ascendant the entire time. He lied and said Alyssa destroyed it. Why though? Because this was after they already found out about the Landon thing, but I'm assuming it's because in his mind he thought he was doing the right thing, because it's like, if he let anyone know about the Ascendant, then maybe he thought people would use that, and it's like, we can't take the chance that Malivore and its monsters might come through, so maybe that's why he hit. He didn't want to destroy it, but he probably was trying to figure out, you know, because I think for him, he was like, I'm doing what's best for everyone. Well, because I think it's so interesting, because he told Caleb not to give up on the whole Landon thing, and for you to immediately hide the Ascendant like that, it's just kind of like, wait, what? Like, why would you telling Caleb that while doing that, the one thing that could lead you potentially to Landon if necessary? So I think it stems from the fact is that, well, time in the prison dimension works differently. So when he was there with Lizzie first, do you think he might know that Landon was there? Like, maybe that's the thing of like, when he was with Lizzie, he did find Landon, but he just didn't say anything at the time. I doubt, like, because that's why I'm wondering, like, if the stuff of Landon had already happened and he's already back outside in the prison world. I mean, he's at that time they were astral projecting, so it's not like any of the monsters, including Landon, would have been able to see him. So maybe in his mind, it's like Malivor's still running amok. It's like, yeah, Landon's there, but we can't take the chance that, you know, until they have a permanent solution or something, he didn't want to get anyone's hope up. Maybe that's what it is. I don't know. Like, that's my only explanation, like, why he would do that. It's MG. Because I doubt this has anything to do with the no, like, oh, not wanting to, him wanting to say no from now on. Because like I said, that, like, the whole Landon thing had already happened ahead of time. So I'm assuming it has something to do with that front of, like, I think he's trying to protect everyone. And, you know, because a lot of sacrifices have to be made. But it also is a thing of, like, you know, he's like, yeah, don't let fear stop you from being honest with the people you care about. So, because he's kept it this long, and he knew, like, how Hope would potentially react. So maybe that's what that stems from. I'm really curious to find out. Like I said, this is just speculation on my part. I'm really curious to find out what is his reasoning for that. So hopefully we get to that answer immediately next episode. Hope is not happy, especially with, like, her now thinking, like, oh, Landon still might be out there, that this might be a way. And it's like, well, you've been sitting on this the entire time. Especially because she thought her means of potentially, like, she thought she ran out of possibilities. So it's going to be interesting to see where all this ultimately ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. So, but really, that's all I want to talk about. Until the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.